What's up, guys? Welcome in. Give some time for some people to get in here. This is the first real week that we really look to get back to outreach. Beginning of the year is tough, right? Like, not a lot of stuff going on. Christmas, New Year's, it's like a dead week, right, between Christmas and New Year's. So everybody's usually out of the office. I don't know about you guys, but usually that week is not best suited for outreach, in my opinion. But now we should be back to hitting it full force. Should absolutely be back to hitting it full force. If you guys have questions, please drop them in the chat, no matter what platform you're listening on, and then we're going to touch on some stuff from YouTube as well. We're going to go into a little bit more, obviously, unless there's questions pertaining to other things, we're going to go into a little bit more of sales tonight. And if there's questions about that, anything that I say, again, interact. Let's get a conversation going regarding that, because at the end of the day, sales is what drives this business, and it's what's going to help you, you know, put revenue on the board, basically, right? So, um, let's dive right in. If you guys haven't seen as well, there's some good YouTube videos out that we just came out with. I'm actually going to drop that link before I do anything else. We have a find products video, how to find wholesale suppliers in 15 minutes. I'm going to drop that in a chat for you guys right here. If you have not checked that out yet, I would definitely recommend checking that out. It's a video where I go through a bunch of different products that you guys can actually contact yourselves, or you can basically, right at the end of the day, it's like the saying, teach a man to fish, right? Want to have the strategy down for you to go out and find these suppliers and these brands on your own. I think that's way more important than just giving you brands and suppliers. Going to jump into a bunch of questions off of the YouTube channel. If you have questions in the meantime, and like I said, then we'll get into some sales strategy. All right. First question up in here from YouTube says, can you make the video or make a video that shows how we could take photos and make videos of the product and represent it if we get exclusivity, right? So a lot of questions on like, how do I execute, right? I'm on the phone with the brand and I'm like, I'm saying all these things. Yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to increase your sales by pictures and infographics and stuff like that, right? Like, how do we get from the point of being on the phone with the brand, saying these things, and then once we close the deal, it's like a lot of times it could feel overwhelming. And so this is one of the biggest questions, initially is right, like, how do I overcome that? And you know, one of the things that we always say, right, is that you don't necessarily need to understand all of the intricacies and how to do absolutely everything from a technical standpoint, right? It's more important that you understand how to actually sell the vision, right? And so, regarding the implementation of something like this, we always recommend, unless you're of the size where you can take it in house, right? You have someone in house that's doing all of this stuff. You know, outsourcing it on something like Upwork or Fiverr, like there's nothing wrong with that. It's definitely, honestly, more efficient, because at the end of the day, your time is better off spent in other places, right? Your time is better off spent in other places that are driving the revenue of your business. And so for something like this, if you really want to do it yourself, we recommend something like Canva or learning, basic Photoshop or something like that. Honestly, AI has been really good, has come really far with image creation. I remember when AI first came out as far as image creation, it was like absolutely horrendous and, could never pass for anything that you would actually use on a listing. But Amazon has kind of, implemented AI within its own system. And then there's obviously other, um, sorts of chat GPTs of the world and different things like that. There's some that are actually more for image creation. But I was actually asked this by a brand on the phone today where it was like, um, basically, how do you do this? And he had referenced AI, but I still think I'm a little biased on this. I think that if you have someone in house, that's the best. But if not, outsource it. Again, you don't need to focus on doing everything, right? Next question in here, and um, this is an interesting one, right? Should we sell sexual health related products like lubricants, et cetera, if there's a huge opportunity? My short answer on that is no, right? I don't think that you should do that on the basis of other brands that you reach out to are going to research you. They're going to look at your storefront. And in most cases, it's probably not something that you want them to be getting, you know, the image of you through something like that, right? If there's an opportunity that's so great that you can't turn it down, you know, it's obviously a call that you have to make on your own. I don't really recommend doing it because it's just not something that is a good look for the most part. You're not necessarily worried about selling the products from like a compliance standpoint or anything like that. It's more so on the basis of just like it's just not a good look. You know what I mean? At the end of the day, there's plenty of other products to sell. And honestly, at the end of the day, there's a lot of profit and other things. Same thing, like we don't recommend supplements that are extremely like um, just complicated because of all the terms of service elements of Amazon. Same thing with like medical supplies, anything like that. Just not something that we recommend. There's a lot of opportunity elsewhere. Next up in here, we have what is keep a product criteria? What do you filter based on? So I'm actually going to link another video as well. So this, if you do have a question on how to source, right? If you have a question on how to source it all or anything, um, we're gonna drop a video here that we have made based on sourcing criteria. So check out that video. It's a fine products video, and it shows all of the sourcing criteria very in depth in detail. That being said, some of the criteria that we like to focus on, right, has to do with the sales rank, but it also could do with the volume, the velocity per month. I arguably think that's a little more important because as we know, like sales rank is relative to the category. So like a million in books and a million in video games is different. So I don't really like to sort it out based on that. But sold in the past month, we'd like to do a buy box price of, let's say $18 or something like that. Not to say that there's not opportunity under that price. There is opportunity in the 9.99 areas. There's opportunity in the 14.99, 15.99 areas, etc. But there is a ton of opportunity above and more opportunity above, in our opinion. $18 high average selling prices, kind of where we want to be at the end of the day. Just seemingly, it makes more sense, right? One of the things that when we close wholesale accounts and we try to procure accounts, a lot of times we put in the same amounts of effort, regardless of the price of the product. Obviously, like larger accounts, they're going to be harder to procure just because, it's a bigger payoff at the end of the day and the brands are usually more invested. But one thing to think about is your time investment. And so you want to make sure that your time investment when you are looking to source a product is worth it. And so if you're investing, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months into closing a wholesale account, I don't know about you, but if it's me in that position, I would rather, I'd rather it be something that is worth it for me, just on the basis of the sell price. And a 10 to 15% profit margin of $100 item is a lot better than a 10 to 15% profit margin of something like a $10 item. And we've seen that too. Like a lot of our private clients and people within our mastermind, we've actually um, kind of pushed for a little bit more of a higher selling price. And we've seen less units, less work, less prep, all that stuff. And we've seen kind of the same results, right? You only need to close one account, a lot higher average selling price, and we are good to go. Any other questions relating to any of that? Again, feel free to drop them in. I know I am going off on different topics here, but feel free to drop questions as well, and I will pause and answer those. I am just pulling a bunch of stuff from YouTube right now that we've gotten asked. All right, so pretty basic question here, right? But let's dive into this, and I want to use this as a question to segue into the sales that we're talking about, right? So, how to get brand direct accounts? Brands reject sellers. Well, let's talk about some good news relating to this, right? You hear a lot of times we hear people talk and say, you know, Amazon, it's oversaturated. There's too many sellers. I just can't seem to make things work, right? And I think that Amazon is oversaturated for those that don't know what they're doing, right? There is a tremendous influx, and I think the number is it's something crazy. It's like $550 $550, 550 sellers a day or something like that, where that is how many accounts are being created, right? So it leaves us this gap of, do you really think that all 550 sellers, those of which 30-40% of them or whatever are doing wholesale, right? Do you think that all of those sellers are using the right frames and the right mindsets? And realistically, most of those sellers are gone within 6 months, right? So Amazon being oversaturated is not a thing. The account creation of Amazon accounts is definitely oversaturated. I'll tell you that. But the sellers that know what they're doing, slim to none, right? Um, and obviously, there's a ton of sellers that know what they're doing, but relative to the amount of accounts that are created on Amazon and the amount of sellers that are trying to sell on Amazon, there's a huge difference between what a hobby seller is and what a real seller on Amazon who has a sustainable business is. And so that's the thing. With years and years ago, right? Sellers came into the marketplace. It was a totally different game. There was a point in time at which Amazon was actually reaching out to brands to try to get them to sell on the platform. Now, obviously, that if you're selling on Amazon now, it's no longer the case. And you're like, I don't even understand how that was possible that was happening, but it's true, right? So everything it's cyclical. And so we look at it from the perspective of, well, if Amazon's not like that now, if you can't just, snap your fingers and close a wholesale account, well, what do we do in the marketplace to differentiate ourselves from the 550 selling accounts that are being created every single day? And so that is kind of what I want to get into, right? So my first thing on that is we talk about how to get brand direct accounts, right? Well, the first thing is you need to approach it from a perspective of being professional, and you need to approach it from a perspective of not coming in with an ask, right? Which is the kind of sales stuff that I want to get into. So asking something right off the rip is going to put you in a bucket with the other 549 sellers that we talked about. If you do that, you're going to find yourself in a place where the brand has made a judgment based on you. I call it the Amazon reflex, right? They've made a judgment based on you, based on the things that you've said about Amazon. And so they're never going to want to talk to you because they think that you're just like every other seller that's out there and they don't want to have anything to do with you, right? So we look at it and we're like, well, how do we get across that? How do we stop that Amazon reflex? I think of it like when you're at the doctor and they hit you with that little hammer or whatever it is on your knee, and your knee will move automatically, right? You can't stop that even if you tried, right? It is a reflex, it is a natural reaction that you have. The difference that we have when it comes to Amazon here is that we are able to influence the reflex by doing things like providing value, by redirecting the conversation somewhere else. Everything that we can do to overcome and build trust is what's going to get us in the door with the brands faster. So before we go into anything relating to pitching or exclusivity or even purchasing, the biggest thing is we have to get over that Amazon reflex. That is very, very important because if we can't do that, we're never going to be able to get to step two and be able to actually talk and have a conversation, right? So that is the first thing. That's the most important thing is getting through that reflex. The second thing I want to talk about there too is, the hobby seller revolution, as I like to call it, right? If you're selling on Amazon, you're trying to do brand direct wholesale, right? It's not something that you're going to be able to do if you're treating it as a hobby. We always say, Brad and myself, right? This business model is simple, but it's not easy. We're selling name brand products that we find on Amazon and we sell. We don't have to necessarily do marketing. We don't do ads. We don't have to do any of that. We can obviously for brand exclusives and to add value. But at the end of the day, it's not like private label where we have to invest a ton of money and go based on data. But at the end of the day, we're hoping that the product works. We're not doing that. We're going based on data that is very proven. And most of the products that you could sell on Amazon absolutely, absolutely work because we're going based on data. We're not guessing. But it's simple, not easy. So if we look at it from the perspective of how to get brand direct accounts, reject sellers, right? Well, a lot of times, you know, at the beginning, like I said, it's not easy. It's difficult. And so when you're reaching out, you need to be reaching out in volume because we make mistakes, right? We make mistakes at the beginning, and it's important to learn from those mistakes. So a lot of times when you see that brands reject sellers, it's probably because one of two reasons. It's because you haven't developed the skill set enough where your closure rate can become higher. And the other element of that is to say that, you know, if you've reached out to enough accounts, someone is going to say yes. Just like if you don't have credit, right? Credit terms or net 30 with a brand, right? We'll hear that every once in a while. People like, how do I get net 30 terms? Well, if you reach out to enough brands, one day someone is just going to give you the net 30 terms, right? Without doing a background check, without doing anything. And that's the same thing in the outreach process. If you are able to reach out to enough brands, you're eventually going to get that one brand that it's the right place at the right time, and they say yes, and you're able to open the account. And it's all a matter of volume. The difference now, what separates a beginner from a complete expert at this is the ability to get through to the accounts that are not necessarily the ones that are easy to open. We have three different categories. We have the easy to open, we have the unsure, and we have the no, the hard no. And that unsure is where all of the money is made, or most of the money is made. Not to say you can't open an account that's easy, but I'll tell you from experience, the best accounts are the ones that at first are a no, right? Amazon FBA wholesale business is real. Absolutely, right? No matter what business model you do, and we say this all the time, like every business model on Amazon works. It does. It's just about the risk that you want to take, right? Arbitrage works. I'm not going to say arbitrage doesn't work. Private label absolutely works. But wholesale works. Wholesale from distributor works. Brand direct wholesale works. Everything on Amazon works. But the reality is, if you want the safety, security, safe, consistent, reliable income, brand direct is the way to go. And we see that that is the way that the whole industry has gone with this, especially with Amazon cracking down on stuff more and more. And you can actually blame the hobby sellers that I was talking about before, right? 550 Amazon accounts being created a day is really, like I said, most of those are probably not good sellers, or at least probably not sellers that are looking to take this seriously. And so, as a result of what those sellers do, Amazon has cracked down a lot. And that's just the reality. But I think that from experience, it's just about learning to pivot. That's really what it is. Amazon's always going to have something new and exciting and maybe not so fun for you to deal with. And it's just about learning to pivot. And it's not necessarily you, it might be your business model, right? As long as you're willing to put in the work. Every business model works, but that business model, excuse me, might not be suited to kind of what Amazon, the direction that they're going. Question here as well has to do with a book actually, books for brand direct and wholesale and sales and things like that in general. And one of the best ones that are a couple different books that we always recommend is the book Exactly What to Say. Obviously, the book Never Split the Difference. Anything relating to tactical empathy and sales, because at the end of the day, that's really what this is, right? Drop another question in here from YouTube. All right. So this is a little bit more complicated, kind of a three-part thing, right? Recently purchased a product through a distributor, but for my last order, the distributor arranged for the brand to send the stock directly to me. So distributor, brand is selling the stock directly to the seller here. Previously contacted the brand, didn't receive a response. They only have an email address and no phone number. Now that they have fulfilled a direct shipment for me, I'd like to follow up and ask about opening a direct account. Could you please guide me on how to write the email professionally, what to include, and what to avoid? All right. So basically, at the end of the day, for this, we have a hierarchy, right? Our hierarchy has to do with how we want to contact the brand. And the first one is going to always be by phone. That is because we're able to tell, again, from a sales angle, the tonality on the other end of the phone. A no doesn't necessarily mean a no if it's on the phone because we can tell the tonality. In fact, the best accounts are usually the ones that start with no, like I mentioned. So in this case, we already have a direct contact through a distributor, but we're looking to go to the brand. And that's honestly a great perspective a lot of the times. Getting the foot in the door with the distributor, you can often get into the brand, which is a super good place to be, right? So, how do I draft an email up? No phone number. Well, first of all, I would recommend that you actually go and try to find a phone number. Get creative. Use ChatGPT. Use other websites to find the phone number of the brand. I mean, you can even do other things like purchase, one of the different product or maybe like something else that they might carry. See if there's a phone number on it, right? Maybe you can send a generic like contact email and then you'll get a phone number back. Like, there's a ton of different strategies to getting the phone number. But basically, at the end of the day, I would, assuming that the brand knows that you're buying the product through a distributor, you could approach it from a pretty general, or a pretty general response and just being like, we're selling the product, and asking things of a sort of nature of what their presence looks like, right? If they have issues where they're dealing with things on Amazon and you could see that, but you haven't been able to get in touch with them yet because you're going through the distributor, then it might be good to approach it from the perspective of like, hey, we've been buying your product for X amount of time, et cetera, et cetera. We're just like, we want to take a vested interest in what you guys are doing, not just sell the product transactionally. And the best way to do that is by talking to you. Do you mind getting on like a 5 to 10 minute call, right? You can keep someone on the phone for 5 minutes, you can keep them on the phone for 5 hours. So reaching out and approaching it with genuinely providing something to them rather than making an ask is the way to get your foot in the door most times. John, what's up? Recently been dealing with a regate. It is such a hassle. Yeah, man. Regates are, if you're dealing with them, not easy, not easy, right? We talk a lot about, when I hear people coming from arbitrage and stuff like that all the time, right? John, you're doing wholesale, right? So a little bit different. I'm assuming this is a wholesale, like a brand direct product. And I'll tell you right now, man, it's count your blessings on it, right? Because if you're dealing with arbitrage or if it's a constant arbitrage product or something, Like that is the reality. I've heard from a lot of people. I talked to someone the other day that in arbitrage had all the actually someone that joined our mastermind, um, switching from arbitrage to wholesale, and was dealing with all these issues, the products being sent back to them, and just a hassle. So yeah, not easy. Not easy. Unfortunately, we play on the Amazon playground, so we play by their rules. And hopefully, if you have everything correct, like invoices and all that stuff, you shouldn't have any sort of um, you know issues at all. All right. Question in here about brand registry. So brand registry, often a confusing topic for a lot of sellers. And, you know, it's one of those things where you're not really, you don't really deal with it most of the time. And then when you go to deal with it, it's usually already when you're dealing with a brand and you have to understand it fully, right? So it says, I have a question. When you become an authorized seller of the brand and they add you to the brand registry, can they be controlled from Amazon Seller Central, or we have to make a brand registry, right? So I want to clarify what this question is a little bit. I want to really break down the differences between brand registry and Amazon Seller Central. I always use the example of it is like a license and it is like a car, right? So the license is the permission to do things. Let's think of that as brand registry. And then we have on the flip side of that, we have something like the car to actually drive it to get the actions done. Let's think of that as seller central, right? So we need those two things talking to each other. We also need connections between the listings themselves, the brand registry, brand, and the seller central account, right? So basically, to answer this question, we have the brand registry account. Now, you can become a user, an authorized user, whether it's an admin, a registered agent, the rights owner, whatever it is, right, on the brand's brand registry account. So you can be added on there. Now, when we do this, I always recommend that you're using emails other than your Seller Central email, right? We don't want any sort of overlap, in my opinion. It's rather safe than sorry, right? Have a separate email set up to do that, whether it's like brands at yourcompanyname.com, whatever it is, right? Any other sort of email. So you want to just keep things clean. So if we have the brand registry, we have a user that is added onto the brand registry, and we do that because we want the license to the car. So basically, that is giving us permission as the brand representative or whatever it is to make some changes to have the license, on behalf of the brand. And then the Seller Central is a kind of a different thing where we're using it to implement changes. So you can't upgrade a title to something better from brand registry. You have to do that through Seller Central. The things that are through brand registry, like you need brand registry for, are the A plus content and the brand store. You have to have brand registry for the brand. But again, everything is operated through Seller Central. Can a pro forma invoice be used to ungate products on Amazon FBA wholesale in the US market? So, if you submit an invoice that shows it has not been paid or shipped, right? Then, in most cases, I'm not saying every single time, but pretty much all cases, right? Amazon will say that your invoice has not been paid, basically, right? It's not a paid invoice that's sent. So you can't use a quote or anything like that, but you can use an invoice before you receive the product, as long as that invoice says that it is paid. One thing that I will note on this topic, though, is that you're not necessarily going to deal with a lot of ungating issues as you become more established. I was again dealing with someone in our mastermind the other day, and they had gating issues, but those gating issues were not a result of the brands. It was a result of the account being new, or the Seller Central account, right? So something to keep in mind for sure is that as you grow, it's not going to be a problem necessarily where you have to ungate brands or products. Brad and I really never have to do that with our business. Very, very rare. And when we do, it is we just click a button and it's done, right? And it's not because it's obviously it's because of the age of our business, but it is also because of the types of products and the brands that we're selling. If you're selling these big name brands, it's a totally different story because the gating process on that is usually going to be a lot more in depth, right? All right. If you guys have any last minute questions, probably going to be jumping off here in a little while. Feel free to drop them in. A lot of great questions off of the YouTube tonight. Everything from just brand registry, right, to sales, data close accounts, like everything like that. This is a whole, it's a dynamic process, right, guys? Like this isn't just something where you can learn one part of this and and make a very successful business. You need to learn everything at the beginning and then slowly outsource things to stay in the driver's seat in the revenue driving task, which is the sales and the outreach. So really at the end of the day, we block things into four pillars usually, right? It's the sourcing, it's the outreach, it's everything after the outreach, which has to do with the logistics and all of that stuff, the price lists, all the applications, and then it's the brand exclusivity, which is really at the end of the day where your sites should be set on, as a brand direct seller. All right, and so we're going to drop one last question in here, a little more granular, right? How can I run PPC, pay per click advertising? Don't have a trademark. Is that possible, or do I need to apply for a trademark? So I'm gonna kind of deal with these differently. What's up, Johan? How's it going, man? I'm gonna deal with these kind of separately, right? So applying for a trademark is basically, we talked about brand registry earlier, right? So applying for a trademark has to do with Amazon being able to recognize your brand in brand registry. We cannot have anything in brand registry if we don't have a trademark tied to it because Amazon has to recognize the brand, right? And so applying for a trademark, we could do that through two different ways. If the brand already has a trademark that is pending or registered status, we can use either one to upload to brand registry. Then we are able to apply for brand registry, right? If the brand does not have a trademark, we can actually use Amazon's accelerator trademark program to get that trademark pending faster. They have partnered law firms, things like that, that are going to get us to where we need to be faster with the trademark. The second part to that, right? We talk about PPC. First of all, PPC, you need a professional selling account in order to run PPC, right? I am 99% sure on that. Somebody check me on that, but I believe you need a professional selling account, right? Access other features, things like that. And that is done within the Amazon dashboard, right? The question on pay per click ads that I would be asking is, are you the exclusive seller? Are you going to be in the buy box to allow your sponsored product ads to run, things like that, right? So again, PPC, bringing it full circle to the beginning of this live. I want to talk about the difference with, let's go back to this first question, right? I want to take a look at this, right? This was the first question that we got, right? Based on photos, videos, product represented with exclusivity, right? And then the last question in here, PPC trademark, how's that possible? Do I need to apply for a trademark, right? Let's think about it from this perspective, right? Is that we don't need to know how to do everything. I said that in the beginning. We need to know how to sell the vision and how to outsource, right? So there's plenty of PPC firms. There's a PPC firm that we are partnered with inside our mastermind, within our community, right? So hiring someone like that is super beneficial because we want to take your time to keep you in the revenue driving task, keep you in the driver's seat, and keep pushing your business forward. That is the most important thing. Johan, when do you think it makes sense in instance of using an agency for ads or better hiring an internal team? I think that it makes most sense in most cases to use an agency, right? Everything, Johan, we talked about in the beginning of this live, we talked about some stuff relating to hiring someone in-house for all the listing optimization versus, again, Fiverr or Upwork or something like that. And the reality is most of the time, unless you have the need constantly for this, you're probably better off using it on an outsourced basis because of the frequency and the money and everything, right? It's like the same equivalent for me of hiring a prep center versus having a warehouse, right? You have to look at the pros and cons. How often is something going to be used? How much are you paying to use it? What is the trade-off between for a prep center, right? Like the dollar per unit versus the fixed cost of a warehouse rent. You have to look at it from that perspective. And so I think with PPC, I think it could be granular. I think that especially you, brother, like not the best use of your time. I think that you should actually have someone maybe as an agency, right, to do something like that. Um, I just think that's a better move personally, right? Good question, though. All right. If you guys have any other questions, drop them in. I picked this up, what was it, yesterday? I've been trying all of these, right? That Liquid Death has everything that is supposed to taste like sodas. And I'm loving the Dr. Pepper tasting one. This one tastes nothing like Coca Cola. And I'm pretty upset by it. And I'm getting through them. I got about four more, but I'm definitely not going to be buying it again. All right. Why do many FBA wholesale sellers face Section 3 deactivations? What specific steps can prevent this and ensure long-term account compliance? Man, that is like that is a question like right out of a textbook. I love it. So again, let's back into this by saying what is a Section 3 and why does Amazon issue them? A Section 3 stands for Section 3 of Amazon's terms, basically. That is an account suspension or account shutdown. The stuff that happens when the accounts get shut down is Amazon holds your money, they hold your inventory, and yeah, not a good situation, right? So basically, what we are looking to do is we are not looking to do what most sellers do, which is I'm going to wait until I get a Section 3 and I'm going to fight it, right? That is a terrible strategy. We don't want to do that. What we want to do is we want to practice business models that are keeping us from getting that problem in the first place. So, why do Amazon's wholesale sellers face Section 3 deactivations? Now, let's expand this. Why do Amazon sellers in general face Section 3 deactivations? Well, at the end of the day, it's a lot more common in other business practices, arbitrage, right? Unless you are doing what we like to fool around and call glorified arbitrage, which is buying really sketchy wholesale products from sketchy suppliers that are not authorized. It's not a good look, right? So the Section 3 process starts at the perspective of where are you sourcing the product from and how are you complying with Amazon's terms of service. So Amazon TOS, you don't want to be selling restricted products for one. And you can check that based on Amazon's terms of service. And the second thing is you don't want to be sourcing products from shady suppliers, invoices, things that I've heard every story in the book, right? As far as account shutdowns and where I was getting product from, liquidations, like all things like that. So the specific steps to prevent this, there's two different things. The first one is that we are creating our own brand, right? We're doing private label, we're creating our own brand. Its product is within terms of service. And the second one is through sourcing product directly from the brands or authorized distributors and being authorized by the brand to do so. So I always use this example, right? Let's say that there is Procter and Gamble, big conglomerate. I think they make like Colgate or something, right? Let's let's say they don't, but whatever, right? So they make another product. Let's say that that brand somehow authorizes you to sell the product directly, right? You got a massive account. Great. But Procter and Gamble didn't authorize you to sell the product, right? And so you could have this issue where you are getting a Section 3 from an IP complaint sent by Procter and Gamble, or obviously this is an example like with a big company and a big brand, but we could have this on a smaller basis. Distributor, brand, distributor selling to you, brand selling to distributor. Brand doesn't want you on the listing, and either distributor is selling behind their back, which is a whole nother thing, right? But either way, the brand can issue you an IP complaint, right? So we have to look from the perspective of we need to be authorized by the brand and we need to be buying from an authorized distributor in order to make things right. And so let's again, I want to take it full circle to the hobby seller, right? I don't know about you. I want to make money for a long time on Amazon. I don't want to make money for 6 months and then never make money again. So making sure that we take the steps in advance of ever running into something like a Section 3 or any sort of account health issues, like, yeah, it's inevitable. I get it. You're going to get things, but it's important to really look at it from the perspective of prevention rather than from like defense. And like, once I get it, what am I going to do about it? Great question. And honestly, a lot more sellers could avoid those types of things if they chose the correct business model, right? Which again, brand direct wholesale, that's why we do what we do. We've been selling full-time brand direct since 2019, and there is a reason for that, right? That is the way that Amazon is going. That's the way the industry is going. All right. Any last minute questions that we have on here? Anyone? All right. So if you have any last minute questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. If you are still here this far into the live and you are looking to get support to take your business to the next level, or if you're just starting an arbitrage, something like that, and you're like, I want to get into wholesale, this is where I want to go. We do have, Brad and myself, we have private mentorship and mastermind. I am going to link that right down below here. And if you guys would like to check that out to apply to see if you qualify for that, we would be happy to see how we will be able to help you scale and grow your business. So if there's no other questions, it's operationamz.com. We will be back on here live next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern. I appreciate you guys watching. Let's keep crushing it, crushing that outreach and staying consistent. It's the most important thing, and it's going to be what makes your business, right? So we will see you next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Eastern. Let's go.